Hey there, it's Sanjay Gupta. I'm back from Rio, back here in the United States, and I'm going to do sort of a hard-hitting segment with you now on something that you have probably heard a little bit about, but maybe you don't quite know what it is. It's called cupping, and what's interesting is that again, this isn't a big hard-hitting segment or an investigative segment, but it is something you've noticed because if you've been watching the Olympics at all, the swimmers, you see these big bruises all over their skin, and you may be wondering what that is, how did that happen, and what is it supposed to do. And I'm going to try and give you as much as I can about this concept known as cupping. Let me just show you one of these things, and I'll explain to you a little bit more as we go along. I got a bunch of them here, but oh well, you can see it. So this is glass, okay? And the way that this typically works, and people who say, hey, look, this is the way you're supposed to do it, there's no set protocol on these sorts of things, in large part because there have been modifications to this technique for a long time. This cupping practice has been around for 1,000 years, really, in certain countries in the world. But you actually heat up the air inside there with the flame or something like that, and then that sits on the skin. Wouldn't be here on the hand, obviously, but it would sit on the skin, and we'd eventually start drawing some suction up into the glass, and it's that suction that literally is sort of pulling the skin away from the muscle. And when you do that, you got a bunch of blood vessels in that area, they bleed, and that's the cause of the bruising. So that's a glass one. Here is another one. This is actually one that you would actually create the suction yourself by pushing it and then basically letting it sit on the skin, pulling the skin up from the muscle, again, the skin up from the muscle, letting it bleed a little bit, and causing that bruising. Both these techniques are called dry cupping. There is something known as wet cupping as well, where you actually cut the skin a bit and get some blood in the area around the cup. Now, why are they doing it? Good question. The practice has been, hang on, one more actually. This, you can say this, the practice has been in China for a long time. This sort of makes the point. It's a box from China, and you can see that they actually have a little gun, sits in this cup, and they extract the air from it to create that suction. And again, I know I've said this a couple of times, but you're pulling the skin up away from the muscle, and you have lots of tiny blood vessels, capillaries, that will bleed, and that will cause that bruising again. Now, there isn't a lot of data on this, despite the fact that it's been around for a long time. There haven't been a lot of studies on this to show that it is effective, that it's not effective, or whatever. Most of the studies out there have basically said maybe it's as effective as other types of things, or it may be as effective. Any effectiveness comes from the placebo effect, sort of, and I'm sure you've heard all that. It's difficult to say. People have speculated that when you pull up and get the blood flowing to that area, maybe it promotes healing, maybe it actually decreases recovery time. We don't know for sure what's going on there. Again, that specific sort of study hasn't been done. But typically when you do it, you leave this on for several minutes, can even be longer. Again, I don't think anybody has a set protocol. And what many of the athletes will tell you is that you do get benefit for a couple of days, at least afterwards, at least long enough for one of the events. And that's, again, why they're doing it. And I do want you to keep in mind, when you're talking about Olympic athletes here, there are various fads that have come and gone. But clearly these are people who've been training for years to be able to perform at their very best for a short period of time. And the notion that they would do something like this to their body, I think is safe to say that it's not done sort of willy-nilly. It's something they've given consideration to, and they certainly don't think it's going to hurt them. As bad as those dots look, I don't think it's going to hurt them, but they really do seem to think that it offers benefit. And I bring this up again because there isn't a lot of science behind this. When you have a new cancer drug or something like that, you get these gigantic studies and lots of participants, and you study them over time, and you try and figure out, does this work or does this not work? That costs a lot of money. There's really nobody who's going to probably fund a huge clinical trial on cupping versus other things. And I say that in part in jest, but also to sort of point out what may be sort of a fundamental hypocrisy when it comes to proving things. There are certain things that we don't try to prove versus saying that they are unproven. Just think about that a little bit when you think about it. There's a difference between something being unproven and something that's never been actually attempted to be proven. So there you go. Again, the practice is known as cupping, and Ben, who's actually filming right now, has been gracious enough to try and show us what this looks like and feels like. So I'm going to grab the phone here.
People want to know if this hurts, and I guess there's only really one way to find out.
Right. Oh, should I spin it around? Okay, sorry.
It's a very close-up view of you there, to find out if this hurts.
Right.
So Michael Phelps did this on his back,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to try it right here to get the suction out. And it actually holds pretty well. So I'm pushing down on the top. I'm getting a little suction. I don't know if you can see
That's
the
what it looks like, yeah.
skin inside. This feels kind of weird.
Does it hurt?
It doesn't hurt. I mean, it doesn't feel great, but it doesn't really hurt. You can kind of see my skin pulling up underneath. It's a little red. You leave this on for a few minutes. How long do you think we should sit here?
Do you think that it would help? I mean, I know that you only had it on for a little bit, but what do you think? You've been reading about this.
You know, I'm not really sure what to think of it right now. I'm just kind of looking at how odd my skin looks and feeling like I might have some explanations to give later on why there's a huge hickey-looking mark on the middle of my chest. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it increases the blood flow to that part of the body. I think a lot of people use this after, though, right, as a way to heal instead of a way before to get the blood flowing. I mean,
right.
If you're an athlete, I guess you don't really care, especially at the Olympics, how it looks. You just care how you're going to perform and how you're going to heal.
Yep. Well, there you go. Now, how does it hurt when it comes off? I think,
Let's see. Not bad.
Not bad. All right. Well, look.
I won't be swimming like Michael Phelps.
Right.
Later today for
It's
sure.
not going to make it. But again, and I just want to point out, this is not something that is like a big breaking news story or a news story really at all. But
we're getting
interest.
paid to do this today.
But there's a lot of interest in this sort of thing. And again, I think when people see these images, they want to know, what is it and does it work? And again, it's crystal clear. There's not a lot of data on this. Madison Park, I believe, wrote a really good article on CNN.com. And when we do these articles, we always try and put in the links to whatever studies do exist out there. It's not necessarily an exhaustive list of every single study. There aren't many, but I don't know that we got every single one. But you can click on those links and read for yourself to see if you think any of this might potentially work, or just your thoughts after reading the actual science.
All right, so we'll take a couple questions.
Okay.
One, does it hurt? I will say it did not really.
Okay, yeah.
It did not really hurt. It certainly feels mildly uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt at all. I imagine these are the plastic ones. I would imagine the glass with a vacuum. We've seen that where you use the lighter to really suck the skin up. I assume that would hurt more. And obviously this left more of a mark on Michael Phelps. I don't know if you can see here. I'm a little red, but I don't have any big purple dots on my back.
No, and and to be fair, if it stayed longer and you actually got the bruising, I imagine would be uncomfortable. But again, Olympic athletes willing to do this, thinking that I will take the bruising, I will take the procedure, the process, because I think it's going to help me in some way. That is at least what some of these athletes have concluded.
So we've seen a lot of people use all sorts of different things, cupping, kinesio tapes, stuff like that. Do you think this is cheating? It's not doping. You're not going to test positive for cupping, but
No.
but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that I don't think it's cheating. I don't think it's introducing an artificial substance, and not that that's the only line by which cheating can occur. But I don't think of this as cheating. I think people use all sorts of different techniques, massage, physical therapy, and things like that to improve their recovery time in particular, and their training, and then maybe their performance. But but it does bring up this notion that, cupping aside, that there are lots of teams that are well resourced, certainly in the Olympics, and have access to lots of different types of therapies, such as massage, such as physical therapy, may have an advantage. But fundamentally, I don't think it's cheating.
Can you explain just what this does, though? I mean, it increases the blood flow, really, but people want to know exactly what is going on.
Well, when you have the idea is that you're doing it in areas that you may have soreness, that if you've been training really hard, areas that may take more time to recover, and part of the way that your body recovers like that, it sends blood flow to a particular area. And within that blood flow are anti-inflammatory cells as well as inflammatory cells that all promote healing ultimately in some way. Sometimes that healing hurts. This sort of expedites the process, it seems. So it sort of just accelerates what the body's already doing by rushing more of that blood flow to particular areas. That is the theory, at least. Again, and I've said this a few times, but it hasn't been studied. This is, I guess, a hypothesis, the belief of why it might work. And again, I haven't done this, and it's tough to say how much is placebo versus physiologic. But these are Olympic athletes doing this. Whatever it is, they seem to think it works.
You touched on this a bit at the top, but this has obviously been around for a while. This is an ancient Chinese technique. It's got to work to some extent if it's been around for a long time. But what about acupuncture and stuff like that as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when it comes to these things, and traditional Chinese medicine is probably a good example. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, some of these things have withstood the test of time. Now, it doesn't mean that they could eventually be proven not to really scientifically work, but there's been enough behind it that makes it something that withstands the test of time. People believe it works. Whether we can explain it from a physiological sense exactly, we may not be able to, but whether it's, again, that placebo or psychological benefit, we don't know. But when things withstand the test of time, I think it's important to look at those things. I do think that you have to prove that things are safe. You certainly, I think, no matter what it is, we got to prove that it is safe. What is effective after that? Sometimes some people are going to get more of an effect than other people, and that is true with just about anything, whether it be a medicine or whether it be cupping.
Before we wrap this up, I think we should point out again that this was dry cupping. This is just
dry cupping, yes.
a suction cup on my skin. No blood, no skin broken. That this is very different from wet cupping, which we would probably not encourage anybody to try without talking to their doctor.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any of the athletes did wet cupping.
No,
it was all dry cupping.
I didn't see any athletes do wet cupping.
So that might hurt. I think it would hurt, actually.
And people are saying I should try this on my back.
Really, you're getting that advice? That's very kind of them.
I'm getting great advice here that I should try this on my back and on my neck. That this has really helped people out with.
So there are people who are writing and saying that they've gotten benefits.
Sore and stiff necks that they felt. So maybe something to do for later today.
Sometimes this is how we learn new things. Whether they work or not, some of that may remain to be seen. But the United States and many countries around the world now know a lot more about cupping than they ever thought they would.
Enjoy the Olympics, I guess, then, right?
Thank you.
See you
Thanks for joining us.